Hello YouTube. This will be my video discussing my recent playthrough of Snowboard Kids 1. I actually played this series a lot as a kid, and I had quite fond memories. I was actually very excited to replay this again, and unfortunately I left quite disappointed. I actually think that this game is not very good. I actually think it's quite terrible. I'm sure if people happen to stumble upon this video that I'll upset some folks, but I'll try my best to articulate the many reasons why I think this game is quite bad. And there's nothing I would have wished more than to have played this and come out with a good experience. But it was honestly quite miserable and very boring. But I'll go over as to why I think this game is boring in more detail. Now, I think that there are many aspects of this game that are very good, and I'll go over the good parts before I start sort of going over my complaints. And again, please keep in mind this is just my opinion. So starting off with the good, I think this Snowboard Kids 1 has amazing music. I mean, both Snowboard Kids 1 and 2 have incredible music. If there's one takeaway from this whole video, is even if you decide to not play this, I do recommend actually searching up the soundtrack. I think just about pretty much every single song, or the few tracks that are in this game, is actually a banger in my opinion. So the music is probably the best part of this entire game. Now I do want to touch on sort of the aesthetic, the art style. I've always been a fan of it. I like the character designs, both in Snowboard Kids 1 and 2. So I really don't have any complaints there. I don't have any complaints in terms of the graphics for an N64. I think the game looks quite great. But that's pretty much where my compliments are going to end. I think once we start looking at the gameplay, that's when the problems start to arise. So moving on to the many problems I have with this game, I'm just going to go ahead and start with the track count. I do understand that this is an N64 title, and there's going to be hardware limitations, but when looking at other racing games for the N64, I think that the low track count of 9 is not very excusable. I mean, just looking at a couple of other racing games on the N64, Star Wars Racer, which I played recently, has, I believe, 25 tracks. F-Zero X has 20 tracks. Mario Kart 64 has 16. So, 9 tracks is a little unexcusable if you ask me. The other issue with this low track count is, and this is just common in any racing game, is that the first couple of tracks, since they're the beginner tracks, are going to be quite boring and unremarkable. So when you factor in the first, let's be generous, and let's say only the first 3 tracks, you're really only left with a few other tracks that are mildly interesting. So, yeah, that's a huge problem in my opinion. The game is extremely short. You can pretty much clear this game in an hour, probably less than that if you can get first place finish on your first try. But unfortunately, with a lot of the RNG in Snowboard Kids 1, that might not be your experience if you do decide to play this. Moving on to my second issue with Snowboard Kids 1, and probably my biggest problem, the single factor that contributed to completely killing my enjoyment in this video game, has got to be how the AI functions. And if there was a way that I can describe this in the most accurate terminology that I can think of, is Snowboard Kids 1 essentially has what I would like to refer to as hive mind AI. What do I mean by this? Many other racing games at least are able to give you the illusion that you yourself are racing against, however many other AI characters are in a given race. It's you against each individual character, right? Using F-Zero GX as an example, or even Star Wars Racer as an example. Each individual AI is still, their purpose, the way they're programmed, is to try to win on an individual level. So when I refer to this game as having hive mind AI, is that when you play Snowboard Kids 1, it feels like it is you versus three AI characters. Okay? And I'm going to describe in detail sort of some of my observations of how the AI functions in this game. So there are two boxes for items. There's the red boxes and the blue boxes. Now the red boxes are items that you send out from your character, and blue boxes are more utility items. Think of lightning bolt in Mario Kart, or a banana peel or something like that in Mario Kart, right? So, to simplify it, red items are more offensive, and then blue items are more utility. I mean, I guess every item in a way is kind of offensive in nature, but I guess that's the best way I can describe it. So when you, the player, when you collect a red box in Snowboard Kids 1, you actually have 3 charges of a given item that you can send out. Now, what I did notice when playing through this is that when the AI gets a red box, they actually only get 1 charge of whatever given item that they get. However, they will only shoot this item at you, the player. So, AI, yeah, I'm just going to refer to them as AI A, AI B, and so on and so forth. AI B is not going to shoot a red item at AI C. Okay? They will only send out this item when you have passed them. Okay? So, to me, this is a very unfun mechanic. It is a very unfun way to program the AI to behave, and it just leads to a lot of frustration, especially in combination with the items themselves. The items in this game are extremely lethal. I mean, the best way I can describe it is you imagine if in Mario Kart every item was a red shell that homed in on you, but also had the properties of like a bomb item, and something like Double Dash, or in the newer games, a blue shell, which is an explosion, right? It's a more lethal item than just your traditional green shell or red shell. You sort of take the lethality of the strongest items in Mario Kart, and you've now combined them with the homing aspect of red shells, and that's what the items are in Snowboard Kids 1. That the items all home in on you, and they will completely fuck you up. Okay, to you have items like the parachute, which set you are literally floating in this parachute forever, forever. It is so frustrating. You have the icicle, which again you are frozen for such a long amount of time. The only red item that isn't just like a completely infuriating experience to get hit by is probably the hand, which is the least lethal item in the selection of red items in Snowboard Kids 1. And then you will have your blue items, and this is the only way that the AI in this game can have a negative effect on its fellow AI, right? So the two most notable blue items in this game are the pots and the ghost, okay? Now, thankfully, when one of these AI characters gets a blue item, um, it will actually use it, even if you're not in first place. So you can be in last place, and AIC gets a ghost, and it will at least use it to slow down AIA. And I guess just to explain what a ghost does, because I think, um, the pots and the ghosts are the two most important and notable blue items in this game. Now, obviously, the pots are essentially the lightning bolt of Snowboard Kids. It basically hits everyone on the map, and it's essentially a catch-up mechanic for the players that are in the back of the race. And then you'll have the Ghost, which there's really nothing in Mario Kart like it as far as I know. But essentially the Ghost basically just attaches itself to whoever is in first place and slows them down. So at the very least, the AI is to a degree able to have negative impact on its fellow AI. But my biggest issue is the red items. Again, never did I encounter a single AI character use a red item on another AI racer. So that's what I mean by using the terminology of hive mind, right? It's almost like all three AI characters are working against you. You know, there's only two winners. That's how I felt like when I play this game. Either I win or the AI wins. Any of the three AI wins, right? It did not feel like every character in any given race was playing by the same rules. Again, you know, it's almost like you're playing Mario Party and you get one of those mini games that it's 1 versus 3. That's what it felt like to me when playing this game, and it was just not very enjoyable. You know, you take AI that only seems to target you, and you combine it with items that are significantly more lethal than the items in any other party racer, and you sort of have snowboard kits, right? You know, I'm not totally delusional. I understand that at its core, this is a party racer, just like Mario Kart, just like, you know, Diddy Kong Racing and then Sonic All Star Racing and whatever other party racing games out there. I understand that there's going to be an element of randomness to these video games, but I think this game just takes every frustrating aspect of this genre of games and just cranks it up to 11. Another frustrating aspect of this video game is I don't really have a name for it. I guess I'm just going to call it the final lap syndrome. And what I mean by this is the fact that, you know, due to the nature of the randomness and the items, and especially the ghost item, which attaches itself to whoever is winning, it creates this situation where only the final lap matters. But it even goes far beyond that, because it's not even just the final lap mattering, it's only the last section of the final lap that matters. And most of the tracks in Snowboard Kids 1 are actually 3 laps. There's actually the final track in the game is I believe 9 laps. Now I understand it is a short track, but it's 9 freaking laps, okay? So and this is what I meant at the beginning of the video when I said that this game is boring. Again, I know it might not be like the most fair comparison to compare this to Star Wars Racer. I'm only comparing it to that because I've played it recently. But looking at something like Star Wars Racer, where I had mentioned in that video that, you know, every lap matters. You know, one of the things in that game is that if you fall too far behind, you'll have to restart because the AI will build too much of a lead. So you are engaged throughout the entirety of the race. You know, because you have to maintain good position throughout the whole 3 lap track in order to win. Because Snowboard Kids functions the way that it does with the randomness of the items, you know, laps 1 and 2 are completely irrelevant. Really, the only thing that really matters is just not to let the AI build too big of a lead. But generally speaking, you almost towards some of these later tracks, I was getting so frustrated that once I got the pot item, I kind of just purposely stayed in last place, because really there is no purpose to try to drive well to get to first, because you're just going to get ghosted. I mean, literally, like the AI is just going to send a ghost towards you, and then it's almost like a snowball effect, because one AI is going to ghost you, which is going to slow you down, and then once the other AI characters get close to you, they're going to shoot their only red item at you, and then you're right back to last place. So really, the strategy that I had come up with towards these later races is, screw it, fuck it, I'm just going to stay in last place throughout most of the race, throughout laps 1 and 2, and honestly half of lap 3, because ultimately all of that, it just doesn't matter. And once I realized this, the game just became extremely boring. You know, again, I'm basically playing filler. I mean, it's completely filler. It totally doesn't matter at all. It's so irrelevant. Yeah, in reality, because this game functions the way that it does, it should really only be 1 lap. Like the races should only be 1 lap. because, like I said, not even the entirety of lap 3 matters. And in a kind of messed up way, I stopped even thinking of this game as a racing game. It almost became like a puzzle game. That's the way I saw it. Is like, the puzzle is getting the right setup for the last section of the third lap, and just using the items to try to just screw up the computer as much as possible, screw up the AI as much as possible, and try to get first. It's just not it's just not enjoyable to me. Like, I'm a huge fan of racing games, but I really didn't even feel like I was playing a racing game most of the time, just because uh, most of the quote unquote race is just pointless. Um, Another issue I want to talk about is the different boards. So when I first booted up this game, there's basically three types of boards. There's balanced, there's low speed but high handling, and then there's high speed below handling. So I figured, like, oh, I'm gonna pick the fastest board. I'm gonna pick the high speed board. But once again, if we look at how the items work and we look at the ghost item, it doesn't. You'll never build a lead in this game, no matter how you're playing. Like, you could be driving, and it's weird to say driving because you know you're snowboarding down a track, but I'm just gonna keep using the driving terminology. But you could be driving, you know, pretty well, and at the end of the day, the items are going to screw you up, and eventually the AI is going to catch up, and they're always going to have a red item because they don't use it on each other. I think that's really my biggest complaint here, is that when you are in first place and you're trying to build a lead, and of course you'll guaranteed to lose your lead no matter what. You're gonna get potted. You're gonna get ghosted. When the AI inevitably catches up to you, they're always going to have an item to send at you, right? Because they don't use it on themselves, so they're always gonna have it on hand. Now, Snowboard Kids 2 actually introduced a mechanic that allows you to deal with items and send them back at your opponent. But this is not in Snowboard Kids 1. So, a lot of the times, to me, it felt like there was very little counterplay when the AI just decides to throw these homing items at you. Maybe I'm wrong. If someone is more knowledgeable in Snowboard Kids 1 than me, please correct me. But as far as I'm understand, it is quite difficult to avoid these items. You might be able to juke it if you happen to be near a jump or something like that. But generally speaking, all the red items home in on whoever they are thrown at once they get close enough to them. So, like I said, towards the later tracks, I kind of just shut my brain off. I just shut my brain off, and for the first two laps, I mean, like, I just wasn't even paying attention. I was completely checked out of the video game because my actions just felt completely meaningless. There was no purpose in trying to engage with the track or engage with the driving, because at the end of the day, uh, a combination of the items in Snowboard Kids 1 and how the AI is programmed to behave is going to undo any type of skill expression that this game might have. So I'll quickly mention the different characters. Normally, this is a very important thing for me when it comes to racing games, having a wide variety of either vehicles or characters to pick from. Now, I do know that each character has its own set of stats, but unfortunately, for the purposes of this review, I think any character differences in combination with the boards are just irrelevant due to the lack of enjoyment that I had with this game. This game could have 50 characters. Snowboard Kids 1 could have 50 characters, and it wouldn't matter with only 9 tracks and, the issues with the items that I mentioned before. But I will mention that, yes, each character has its own set of stats, and then you combine that with the 3 types of boards. It's good enough, I would say. At least there is a difference between each playable racer. So, but it's not really going to save the game, in my opinion. Just a few other miscellaneous issues that I have with my playthrough here. I want to talk about the item boxes once again. Now, thankfully, this didn't appear in Snowboard Kids 2, but for whatever reason, in Snowboard Kids 1, when another character picks up an item box, it will almost become like a solid wall while it's respawning to be picked up again. Um, Very, very strange. I'm glad that they fixed that in Snowboard Kids 2, but that could be fairly frustrating where, one of the AI characters could get an item right ahead of you, and then while that item box is respawning, you sort of get pushed to the side. So I also wanted to have this section to sort of go over my point that I think that even as a party game to be played, let's say with your friends, I still think that there are better party racers out there. If I had really had to recommend a group of people that this game is for, I mean, it's kind of harsh, but I would say it's for folks that have never played a video game in their life. Like if you have like your grandparents over or something, or like a toddler that like, I'm talking about folks that have never picked up a controller in their life. Like sure, I mean, I think that this might be the perfect game for them in the sense that, for one, like I said earlier, the tracks are really not that engaging. But even as a party game, I mean, guys, like even as a even party games like Mario Kart and like Crash Team Racing and stuff like that, like there's still some degree of skill expression in it. Yes, it's not going to be like F Zero or a racing sim, but there's a difference between a good and a bad Mario Kart player. Even though Mario Kart at its core is a fight, it's sorry, not fighting, is a party game. But I'll make the argument that in Snowboard Kids 1, I mean, due to the items being so lethal and due to just how the game functions, I don't even think it's a great party game. I would say Snowboard Kids 2 is way better. I'll make a separate video for Snowboard Kids 2 since I played that as well. Um, but yeah, man, it's a shame because I do like the Snowboard Kids series, and even with how frustrating it was to play this as an adult, like I still have some level of nostalgia and love for this game, I guess. But honestly, I can't really recommend it to anyone. Like if someone approached me and asked me, "Hey, like, should I play through Snowboard Kids 1? I never played as a kid. I just can't, in good faith, recommend it. The game is just extremely frustrating and just really not all that enjoyable. Especially the single player experience. I think the single player experience is actually complete dog shit. So to finish off the video and some closing thoughts, and it's quite disappointing that Snowboard Kids 1 turned out the way it did for me for my replaying of it. Generally, pretty much any older game on my channel is most likely, at least for now, going to be something that I used to play when I was younger. And it's always a shame to go back to something that you used to really enjoy only to realize that it's just not very good. So again, just to summarize, I mean, I'll still stand by the fact that the music's amazing and graphically and stylistically, the game looks great. But the low track count and the way the AI was programmed just completely kills any enjoyment, at least in my opinion, from a single player experience. I guess if you have friends, if you have a way to play with some friends and spend a couple of hours, that's probably the best sort of way you're going to have any type of enjoyment here. But I think the game is just terribly balanced. I think the items are infuriating, and it's a shame. It's a shame. I think this game does have fans, and maybe people will get angry at me and disagree. But again, it's just my opinion. I think the game is it's just not good. If I had to give this game sort of a final rating, man, it's rough. I honestly think I give this like a 3. And really, what is even bringing this score up from this being like a 1 or 2 is the music. Uh, just everything else was just so miserable. Occasionally I'll play an older game and I can see myself replaying that in the future, but I just don't think I ever want to touch this game ever again, man. It was so unenjoyable in so many different aspects. Another game that has AI that is kind of like this is something. It's actually MotorStorm One, which I finished and I'll eventually make a video on it. But even MotorStorm One, with its own type of infuriating AI, still has elements to it that I could see myself visiting back in you know in the future. But I just don't see a single redeeming reason to ever come back to this game. Other than the music, but at that point, just look up the music on YouTube and download it or whatever. Uh, just the from a gameplay perspective and from a single player playthrough perspective, I mean, the game is just absolutely horrible, absolutely unenjoyable. Once again, and to me, this is like one of the biggest sins in any racing game is the again what I call the final lap syndrome, where only the last lap, and in this case, again, only the last section of the last lap mattering, just makes the game just so boring to me. Like once you have a better understanding of how the given racing game works, and you've come to the conclusion that yeah, like who cares what happens at the beginning. MotorStorm is actually just like this, by the way. This is another big issue that I have with MotorStorm. It's the same sort of thing where it's a 3 lap racing game and only the last lap is relevant. You're just bored, especially if you fail the race. Especially if some bullshit happens towards the end and you have to restart, and now you go back and do the first 2 laps, or in the case of Snowboard Kids and the final track, you have to do 9 laps just for that chance to get the win on the last quarter of the final lap. It's just complete garbage. I mean, just total garbage. So again, I can't really recommend this to anyone, unless you're, I don't know, some kind of completionist, N64 completionist, or you're completely out of games to play. But yeah, it's a shame. But that's pretty much it.